Gun control in this country has become a political game of fuck around and find out. Welcome back to Bullets and Brass, folks. I'm Remy. Today we are talking about gun control, crime control, buying a gun, how that works, why it's not going to stop crime. The issue our country has with violent crime is not a gun problem. It's not a gun violence problem. The guns aren't too dangerous. The guns aren't too available. They're not too easily purchased by criminals. The problem really is a failure to detect, document, and treat mental illness and the loss of the family unit. And we're going to get into that. We have a continuing problem with violent crime in mostly the major cities. Outside the major cities, crime rates have not significantly changed other than directly drug related. Most of that falls into the issue of the family unit. The failure of the family unit, meaning you don't have a father at home, or both your parents are basically working so hard that they basically are not being parents. You are being raised by the system. I won't get into the religious arguments about that. That's not my thing. There are plenty of people out there who have done that quite well. But I will just point out that from a sociological point of view, from a mental health point of view, this is basically a gimme for creating violent crime. Particularly if you're in an environment where the gangs and other groups like gangs create that replacement family unit and that feeling of belonging and safety, but they do it with a violent nature. They do it where part of being part of that gang is doing violent acts. The statistics don't really lie. It's really obvious where the crime is in this country if you're willing to actually look and not sugarcoat it. The absolute majority of violent crime in this country is committed by young black urban men. And I say men, but men, very often they are under 18. They are in that 14 to 20 year range, 14 to 22. And most of it is committed against their peers. I mean, it just is. It is not predominantly black on white crime or white on black crime or white on Asian or black on Asian or Asian on black. It's black on black crime. It just is. And when you talk about, trying to heal racial issues, that isn't the problem in this country. The primary violent crime problem in this country is black on black, young black men committing crimes. And it's not because they're black. That's just the demographic that is most vulnerable in terms of society. Really, if you don't address that, you can't say whatever you're doing is crime control. It is meant to stop crime or reduce crime. Chicago last weekend, I believe it was last weekend, had 20 people shot, 2 dead, more potentially going to die. And that was one weekend. That's every weekend. It wasn't a special weekend. And this is just constant. These people aren't buying the guns legally. The people committing these crimes in Chicago did not go to a gun store and purchase that firearm legitimately. In fact, Chicago has some of the strictest gun control laws in the country. Did it work? Clearly not. So let's get to the other half of this. What is really going on? How do you purchase a firearm? And what is involved? And what is out there? Because the anti-gun crowd and politicians in general love to sugarcoat this. They love to pretend that the numbers are not what they are, that the system is not what it is, because if they actually address the reality, the real numbers and system, what they're proposing would look stupid. They're proposing something that is 90% already there and has been proven to not work. The rough, and we're talking rough, we can be off by millions, estimate of guns sold last year, just last year, about 20 million, okay? 20 million guns sold legally. This is not, we're not talking black market sales. This is just people walking into a gun store, going to a gun show, whatever it is, and legally purchasing a firearm. 20 million. Plus or minus, and probably plus several million. This is all across the board. This is not one particular type. AR-15s and self-defense oriented handguns represent roughly half of that in terms of the overall numbers, if not more than half. Okay, and that's just last year. Those numbers just represent the current peak because it has been going up pretty steadily for about 15 years, just well, from your perspective that way. Most of that information also points to there being a massive increase in first-time buyers. The last few years, basically pandemic on, first-time buyers have significantly increased, and a lot of them are people, they're not young. This is now adults. This is people who are 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who have previously just not bothered, not cared enough to bother. Going, yeah, the world is a little strange. I would like a little extra protection. And they're buying firearms and they're going to the range and they're learning to shoot. Hopefully they're doing that second part. We'll see. Older black men are a big slice. Late 20s up black men, big slice. Women, all ethnicities, massive increase. The market in general, meaning the manufacturers and the marketing companies and all that, recently, as in the last few years, realized that they were failing to market to women properly. They were not promoting their products to the average woman. They were only promoting it to women that they effectively had already sold to. That they, the women who were making do with whatever was available and converting things and making their own, but they were already customers. They were already buying guns. These companies realized that, hey, we can market to the average woman. We can promote sales to these people who maybe otherwise wouldn't be customers. But once you get them in, they're customers for many other things. If you sell somebody a gun, you're also going to be able to sell them holsters, ammunition, magazines, training, clothing, safety glasses, safety, earmuffs. I mean, it just keeps going. Cases, safes, bags. So as a percentage, new buyers, and particularly new non-traditional buyers, meaning not white men, young white men particularly, that percentage is going up significantly lately. And it's broadening the demographics of gun owners in America, which from most perspectives is a great thing because it politically diversifies the group. Instead of it being the average soccer mom is relatively anti-gun or apathetic, now she's a pistol packing mama. And she understands that, hey, there's a reason for this. I don't want to give up this. And it's not so scary. When you've been to the range and you own one yourself, you can't demonize the object anymore. They don't fall for it. Now, the second part of this, in terms of the statistics and the reality as opposed to the sociology aspects of it, is that the anti-gun groups love to demonize a couple particular types of gun, AR-15s and Glocks. They present this as if these are guns that are primarily used by criminals in criminal acts, that they're highly dangerous, they are exceptionally dangerous would be the correct term. That they are more dangerous than normal. And pretty much it's the exact opposite. It's like anybody who's in the gun community, who's used a variety of guns, particularly if you're a hunter, you're looking at these guns and going, they're like entry level. They're wussy. Most people don't hunt with a standard AR-15. Why? Because it's not enough power. It's literally, instead of being a absolute, killing machine, it's not enough killing power. It is not enough to be an ethical killer on deer and hogs unless you are really a good shot. You need to make a hell of a shot and relatively close range. The average hunting rifle is way more effective. 5.56 is a wussy caliber. It is. The military didn't pick it because it was more effective. They picked it because it was the minimum effective caliber to get what they wanted done. And that was not to be a most effective killer. It was to be able to put somebody out of the fight. It was to be able to punch a hole in a Russian helmet at a certain distance. That was it. That was literally the defining criteria. Actual killing power? Whatever. Size, weight, penetration ability. Well, I got news for you. If you're talking about, what makes something a great killer is so lethal that we need to ban it, penetration ain't it. Going back to the numbers here, the AR-15 is, in 5.56 in particular, is the most common rifle in this country at this point. Millions and millions are sold every year. It is, you can't even keep track because there's so many different companies making them under so many different names that an AR-15, is a honey badger an AR-15? It's a creature with some serious attitude, right? On YouTube or Instagram. The anti-gun groups love to quote, how many are made and blah, blah, blah. And they can't even get their statistics straight because they'll say something like, there's 20 million in the country with 4 million produced last year. The gun's been available in this country since the 60s. Yeah, production ramped up the last 20 years, but I'm going to guess there's way more than 20 million. I'm going to guess that 20 million of them entered circulation in the last 4 years, last 5 years, okay? Like, just going out on a limb, okay? I'm going to guess that 20 million of them went into circulation while Obama was in office. Just saying. So, when they go to say we're going to ban them, what they're really saying is we're banning Honda Accords. We're banning, a Ford Fusion. We're banning F-150s. What? Really? Like the most common popular item on the road for a particular category. We're banning that. Sorry, you can't have that anymore. Why? Because we feel like it. They don't see anything wrong with that logic. And unless you can get other people on board with realizing that that's the level of logic involved, they get away with it. They get to present their facts and nobody checks them. Because keep in mind, all the fact checkers work for the anti-gun agenda, or at least that side of the political spectrum. We can get into the fact that most people who own AR-15s own multiples. Many people who own AR-15s, multiples is putting it mildly. It is the kind of gun people routinely have 4, 5, 6, 15 of. Happens. Next part is handguns. Because really, if we're talking crime control, handguns are where it's at. Most crimes are not committed with a rifle. Those are the big sexy crimes on national news that they can use to ban guns because their goal is to ban rifles. But handguns are really where the crime is. And the main one they like to talk about are Glocks. We've already mentioned that. They shoot normal ammo. Nothing special. A Glock 19 is the most common handgun in this country, and well, guess what? It's not so lethal. It's not going to blow your lungs out, right? The FBI actually said, you know what? 9mm is not enough power. It is not enough stopping power for us to trust. We need something bigger. Okay? For years, for decades, that was the official position of the leading authority on stopping power and law enforcement in this country, that 9mm was not sufficient. But it's too lethal. Oh my God. Oh boy. The end result of all this is that criminals are criminals. They don't follow the law. Making it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to get and own firearms does not stop crime. It in fact encourages crime because the criminals know the people they're going after are not going to be armed. The violent crime problem in our country is a sociological problem, not a hardware problem. It's a wetware, not hardware. So the real question is, since I'm not a genius, and I'm not the first person to say this, see this, bring this to anybody's attention, why are they still after our guns? Why are they still trying to ban guns? Because they know it's not going to affect the criminals. That's been proven year after year after year after year. The cities with the worst crime problems have the strictest gun laws. And clearly they don't work. If they were going to work, how many decades does it take? 1, 2, 3? We're going on 5 in most cases, 6 or 7. Clearly it doesn't work. So what's the What's the concept behind being so consistent in trying to disarm the public? Now, I can't be sure of which of the reasons are their primary motivations, but none of them are good. They all boil down to, we want to do something to the public, meaning we want to do something that the public will disapprove of strongly enough that they would resort to violence in a widespread manner. So we want to disarm the public first. We want to make them less able to resist when we do whatever it is we're going to do. Does that sound like something we should be allowing? Does that sound like something we should be permitting to have happen? No. It's the whole purpose of firearms in this country. It's the whole reason we have a Second Amendment, is that at some point, the government, always, it's just the nature of government, they're going to do something. They're going to push past the point where the general population goes, no, we disapprove. And voting didn't do it. That voting was not the solution at that point. And if you don't have general public firearm ownership, you don't have a choice. You're stuck. You're done. Okay? If you do, it discourages your government from going to that level. It discourages them from pushing things that far, which is what we've seen. They're consistently pushing for gun control because they can't achieve their agenda without it. This is the number one reason to fight back against gun control. Because whatever it is they want to do afterward, I don't care which side of the slash you're on, you're not going to like it. It's never worked out for anybody. Since we've seen just how much the government is willing to do and how much we're willing to put up with over the last few years without widespread violence. Because a few riots, a few protests, honestly, it was obnoxious, but it didn't really amount to much, right? There was not a blood in the streets situation where across the country people were getting killed left and right over this. What exactly do they have in mind? And, we've all heard the phrase, fuck around and find out. Yeah. Just never pictured most of the politicians that are on the anti-gun side when I was saying that. But yeah. So, take care, have fun, stay safe, and we will hopefully edit this down to something that isn't 3 hours long.